I think you're doing some fantastic, amazing work that has piqued a lot of people's interest here, not just in Sri Lanka, but around the world as well.
I was homeschooled. So I joined school when I was 16. I didn't have a great experience of the homeschooling myself when I was a kid.
Is there anything from there that you've looked at and been like, oh, I like the way the indigenous culture in Sri Lanka, like the Vada tribes did that?
You're literally the first person to even connect the two. I don't think I have the right answers, but I definitely pride myself on always asking the right questions. If we had to sit for 6 hours a day without speaking, without fidgeting, without having to ask permission to drink water and go to the bathroom, and made to just follow the rules as somebody else, then we are going to be bubbling like crazy.
When you started, what are the things that you didn't expect that you were like, oh, maybe I need to switch around with this approach?
The first thing that we didn't expect is that...
And welcome back to another I'm No Expert. Today, I've had a very, very cool guest that is shattering the education norm here in Sri Lanka. But first, I need to introduce Yasodhara Pathanjali.
Yasodhara Pathanjali.
I knew I was so close. I was like, we repeated it over and over again. That's my social anxiety for you.
It's fine. Totally fine. And you said Yasodhara fine, so that's great. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. Welcome to the show.
My name often goes out in print wrong. And it really, really upsets me because print, I mean, of course, it's just spell check.
Right.
Pronunciation is difficult if you're not familiar with names, right? So
that's true.
Fine. But yeah, print, another issue.
Is that particularly here in Sri Lanka, or is that back in the UK as well?
No, here.
Yeah.
Here. Which shockingly, they should be able to spell my name correctly here. But yeah.
No, they get my name wrong too. Multiple times. I think my name, Jason, was spelled with an E.
Oh.
Jason.
Never even why? Jason is such a well-known name.
Yeah. Okay. And then there was a Y added to it. But yeah, I mean, spell check it does hit in the field sometimes.
Yeah.
So I came across your Instagram. You're doing some amazing work here in Sri Lanka.
Thank you.
Tell me, for the people that don't fully understand what this means, you've just entered into a new sphere for Sri Lanka of alternative education. What does that even mean? What does alternative education even look like?
Okay. So when we opened the school back in January, I did start off with alternative education as being the way to explain it. But I think the last 4 months have taught me that that's not maybe the way. So now I'm actually rebranding everything as modern education because there was a time when there was mainstream education, and which has never really worked.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty, I hope there's a consensus on that.
Yeah.
But alternative at that time kind of meant maybe you're a little bit hippie, or maybe you have religious reasons for wanting something different. Maybe it's your lifestyle, maybe you're very rural, and so what you need is very different. There were kind of alternative kinds of people away from the mainstream who then needed education to cater to them.
Yeah.
But what I've now come to understand, now the school is open, is what we're doing isn't necessarily alternative. It's just modern.
Yeah.
Because traditional mainstream education doesn't cater to an AI future. So we can't be alternative because we are literally the only school in Sri Lanka that's focused on what the kids will need to succeed in that future.
Nice.
So I'm now calling it Sri Lanka's first modern school.
I love that.
We have no subjects. We have no grades, no classes, no classrooms.
Yeah.
We are purely running on every child and their merit and a personalized curriculum for them.
Right.
So we're now, I think, in an era of modern education, not alternative.
That's awesome. I really love that. So let me, just to follow up on that, So you are basically looking at this kid that walks in through your doors.
Yeah.
You're looking at them, you're assessing them, and you're like, okay, we're going to try to feed more into this, whatever their interest is. That's a lot of manpower, or women power, or people power.
No, I think it's more brain power for sure. But running a school, there's a lot of practical stuff, right? So when you shove 40 kids in a classroom and try to keep them under control, you need more people power. Because what you're doing is unnatural.
That's
because
That's a good
no
point.
child, or even you and I, if we had to sit for 6 hours a day without speaking, without fidgeting, without having to ask permission to drink water and go to the bathroom, if we weren't allowed, if we were completely constricted in every single way and made to just follow the rules as somebody else, then we are going to be bubbling like crazy, right? So we put all these kids in a classroom and we need a lot more power to keep that under control. Yeah. Whereas in my school, when we give kids work, they just go and do it. So I don't necessarily need quite the people power as you might think.
Yeah.
We are still a 12-to-1 student to teacher ratio school. So we do have more teachers than a school that has like 40-to-1 or 40-to-2.
Yeah.
But it's much more that we take time to understand a student, to accept them for who they are, without trying to kind of cookie cutter them and blame them for not fitting a particular mold. So we're very interested in understanding and accepting and respecting every child.
Yeah.
And that takes a certain amount of effort and time at the beginning of the process, but not so much as the pathway goes on.
So when you look at this type of, let's call it a system. When you look at it, this kind of resembles a lot of like indigenous culture.
Yeah.
But in Sri Lanka, I would say around the globe, even in the US, because they would say it takes a village to raise a child, right?
Yeah.
Where or how did you come across this type of path of teaching? Was this with your own kids that this started off with?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled.
Interesting.
Back in London, growing up. So I didn't go to school till I had finished my O-levels or IGCSEs, whatever. So I joined school when I was 16, just turning 17 to start my A-levels. And so I only went to school for 2 years. I love that because that technically gives you the headline, school principal who didn't go to school.
I love that. Yeah, that is good. Milk it.
No. So I went to school for 2 years and I didn't have a great experience of the homeschooling myself. When I was a kid, I would never do it that way.
Okay.
But as a very young kid, I did connect with the idea that even though this is not how I would do it, it opened the doors to a lot if it was done in a different way. So long before I had my own kids, I was very aware that this is what I would want to do with my own kids. So I had my first daughter when I was 25 and immediately I was like, well, I'm homeschooling them. So that was the path that we took. And through the last like 13 years with her and then subsequently the other kids, I just see how their personality is really developed. They are able to question things, to explore things, to like just last night I took my older one to see the Macbeth theater screening at the cinema.
Right.
So was
it the British Council or is that the cinema?
No, it's just at the cinema.
Oh,
but it's like Ray Fiennes and Indira Varma.
Yeah.
Big fan of both of them.
Yeah.
And being able to take a 13-year-old to that kind of thing, and for her to, my daughter's really into acting, so she's already done one play.
Nice.
So being able to connect with her in that way and to explore things without the constraints of a syllabus and curriculum and all of that. It has been a journey. And so when I moved to Sri Lanka, so I moved here in 2016, end of 2016. And I had already been running homeschooling communities in the UK.
Okay.
So when I came here, I realized there was no such community. But there were people homeschooling.
Right.
So I just set up a community and a way to pull them together. Got on Facebook, did the thing, started kind of organizing and getting people connected to each other, doing activities together and all of that. And part of that, and then obviously I started getting in the media. When I kind of got on with the homeschooling community, and then this became a bigger thing in the media and social media in Sri Lanka, one of the things that kept coming up was there were loads of parents out there who were fed up with the system, who understood that the system does not serve their children for the future that's coming.
Yes.
Loads of different, kids who've been bullied, kids who've gone through real difficult times in school. So there were loads of people, but they had nowhere to go.
Right.
Because they were not for varying reasons, they were not able to homeschool themselves. So I kept getting those messages from people saying, well, why aren't you doing something for all those kids? Why is your focus only on your kids and the other homeschool kids?
Yeah.
So slowly over time, that's how the school kind of came to be, because I realized that, I was maybe the one who could pull it off. And here we are, 4 months open, and it's been quite the journey so far.
Awesome. With the, what is the age category of kids that you have in your school right now?
Age 2 to 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So all of these teachers are able to be well-versed to be able to switch from, okay, this is how I conduct with a 2-year-old, and then all of a sudden, like...
So our age 2 and 3 are in a separate building.
Okay.
Because that's play school.
Okay.
So they're just playing, which is what they should be doing.
Yeah.
We don't do any reading, writing with them. They are just allowed to do their thing, build physical confidence, emotional intelligence, a lot of skills, communication, collaboration, all of those really important things, but in a completely relaxed, play-based, holistic environment.
Yeah.
Then in the main school building, we have ages 4 to 7 in a category called heroes, because we don't have grades.
Okay.
So we don't put kids according to age in a year by year system. So all the 4 to 7-year-olds are together.
Interesting.
And they have a couple of teachers in charge of them. Then we have the 8 to 14. It's quite a big chunk.
Yeah.
They're called the warriors. And they're all together.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the 15 plus, the pioneers, and they're together. And we have, in my team, we have people who are more in charge of different sections.
Okay.
But in our day-to-day running, we really encourage everybody to take it in turns to switch.
Right.
It's great for the teachers themselves.
Yeah.
But it's also really great for the students, because you need multiple diverse opinions, perspectives, different ways of doing things for a child to properly develop.
Yeah.
Because if you only have the one teacher or the same 2 teachers for a long time, you're only going to get their skill set, their perspective, their way of doing things.
Yeah.
And in order to really properly develop our kids, we need that mix around and stuff. So we move around.
That's very interesting. I'm very curious about that. Like, how would that turn out for somebody? Because, like you said, we form polarized opinions, right? Well, we look at the news. We're growing up. We're talking to somebody. It's a very polarized view. It's black or white. And so, what would happen to somebody that is well informed from their youth as they're growing up? They're like finding all these different opinions. They're like, I like that. I agree with that. But you're getting a holistic approach to something.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
So part of the reason the school is very strongly trilingual is also that, because in Sri Lanka we have this weird system where you are like an English medium school, Sinhala medium school, Tamil medium school, and never should they mix, right? And in our school, you just study according to the language you're comfortable in,
right?
And we'll cater to that.
Nice.
But that also means that an English-speaking child is constantly coming face to face and getting exposed to a Tamil perspective, a Sinhala perspective, because it's all around you. Just because you're doing your work in English, the kid at the same table might be doing it in Tamil or Sinhala. Right. So it builds community, it builds understanding of each other, and we can't build it by separating. We can only do it by bringing together and sharing. So the trilingual thing is really important to me.
Absolutely. That's great. And we talk about that here in Sri Lanka, at least. We talk about being one nation, and I can see that practically being brought in to the school system. What is, from when you started, what are the things that you didn't expect, which I'm guessing is a lot with kids, but what were the things that you were like, oh, maybe I need to switch around with this approach?
The first thing that we didn't expect is that all of us, the entire team, would be renamed by multiple children. So there's a bunch of kids in school who they're small and they just can't get our names. So they've renamed us, which I think it'll stay with us forever because it's a pretty magical thing. And that's something that stays in our heart, definitely. Something that... The thing is this, I've always said we never set out saying this is perfect.
Yeah.
That I'm perfect, that I have all the answers. It was definitely my thinking, at least about myself and my ego, is that I don't think I have the right answers, but I definitely pride myself on always asking the right questions. Right? Because I think as humans, we are quite often pushed to have the answers. And that, as you talked about being polarized, that really starts to pull you apart, because you take a stand and you're like, no, this is what I believe in. This is the answer. This is the solution, right? But when you do that, you start to alienate people. And you can't ever be 100% right. Or, that's a really dangerous place to get to.
Yeah.
And particularly when you have so many kids' lives, their futures in your hands, you definitely can't afford to take that approach, right? So for me, it's taking pride in asking the right questions and seeking solutions constantly. So the school, I don't think, really surprised us with a lot of things that went wrong, because it was always like, we're going to try this, we're going to watch it, and then we're going to constantly improve. So we, particularly at the beginning, we were having, at the end of everyday meetings with the team, what worked today, what didn't work, okay, how can we shift this, what can we do? And because we're very focused on every child, we're not out there to prove a particular thing right.
Yeah.
We're just here to see, okay, what did we need to do today?
Yeah.
But a couple of the activity stuff that I wanted to succeed didn't really work out. So we've changed that. So earlier we had like a big wall of projects that the kids could choose from. They could not care less. They just could not care less.
Yeah.
So that about 3 weeks ago, that whole wall came, we took that down. And now we put up a huge blackboard, which has caught the imagination of the kids. And actually that brings me to the other thing that didn't work. Was part of our approach to education is that the kids have to be the ones to bring the energy. They have to want to learn, because we can't make anyone learn.
Right.
I can't make you.
Yeah.
You have to want to, right? So in order to build that, from day one, I've been saying to the kids, tell us what you're interested in. Tell us what questions you have. Like, when you look at the sky, do you wonder, is it going to fall down? Is it blue? Why is it blue? What are the questions, right? And it was really, really, really hard for us to get them out of the kids, to be honest, because schools, TV, media, from a very young age, make kids very narrow-minded.
Yeah.
And imagination, creativity, that critical thinking is dumbed down literally by the age of 2, 3.
Right.
It's already not there.
Okay.
Particularly because we see now that we have the kids in school, we can see the gap between kids who have regular access to cartoons, TV, media, and the kids who don't.
Yeah. The
kids who don't are a couple of years ahead, just because their brain is not shut down by all these limits that media put on them, right? So me chasing them to say, bring us your interest, bring us your questions, really didn't work. We put the blackboard up, and now they are literally fighting to write the questions every day.
Right.
Because it's a physical, they can connect to the board physically.
Yeah.
It's visual rather than just telling me.
Yeah.
So this is the challenge of running this school, is that we have to be constantly on our toes, wondering, how's it working? Is it not working? If it's not working, what can we do?
Yeah.
Try this, try that. And then what works for one kid isn't going to work for another.
Absolutely.
So you've got to be very flexible. You've got to be very on it.
Yeah. Finding your next nutrient-dense meal is really tough when you're on the road or you're working really long hours during filmmaking season or whatever it is that you're doing. KION has been with me since day one with its essential amino acids or its whey protein. I'm feeling great 100% while I'm on the road. So if you want to check him out, hit him up on KION.com. The link is in the description below, or use the coupon code Jason plus KION for your goodness on your next basket. Would it be a goodness basket? It's a goodness basket. KION.com. I think you're bringing very solutions that me as an adult is that I'm looking at. Like, for example, the reason why podcasts skyrocket in popularity is because people are fishing out for information that they want to hear about, right? And I think what you're doing is you're already giving them that epiphany before they even set out into the world, which is phenomenal.
If we don't teach our kids to ask questions, how can they go anywhere? Like whether it's personal life, professional life, whatever it is, unless we've really trained our kids to, one, be responsible and take ownership for your journey, which schools don't do traditionally, and to ask questions, which again, schools don't do. I get so many interviews as in kids come to interview at the school. And one of the first things the parents tell me is, I'm taking this kid out of the current school because the teachers are bullying this kid because the kid is so full of questions. And so how is it that we have a traditional system where the person who wants to learn, and you learn by asking questions, when they ask questions, they're being told to be quiet?
Yeah. Fair enough. What is, when we look at the school that you've put into place, what do you think, have you drawn any inspiration from traditional methods of teaching before colonialism? Is there anything from there that you've like looked at and be like, oh, I like the way the indigenous culture in Sri Lanka, like the Vada tribes did that?
You're literally the first person to even connect the two. So thank you.
Yes, that's a first that I'm no expert. Yes. Yeah.
No, I think it's really important. Lot of how education, because it's an industry, and anything that's an industry has money at the end of it. Right? Money is propelling it. And the more that money is propelling it, the more important it is as an industry to seem important. Right?
Yeah.
So school as with the importance that it has in today's society has only really existed in like the last 30, 40 years in Sri Lanka since the international schools came into being.
Right.
Because before that, we only had the government schools. Yeah. And before the government schools was the temple schools, because the Game Iskole was usually in the temple. I know that's for sure about 60 years ago, 70 years ago, other than the big schools. Obviously, the big schools were there. But for the normal person. Yeah. So when you're coming from that level and then you go back in time to pre-colonialism, not even pre-colonialism, there wasn't really organized schools during the colonial period. Schools only really came into being during the Industrial Revolution. And that was that had also, like, so many parents don't understand this. Schools came into being not to develop and nurture our children. Schools came into being because women were needed in the factories, in the textile factories specifically, during the Industrial Revolution. Because in the UK, Industrial Revolution started with textile. So one thing about textile industry is the weaving machines, the parts are very small. And so you need more female hands, which are smaller than male hands. And so in order to get women out of the house, you had to get the kids out of the house. Because as long as the children are there, how the women supposed to go to work? So this whole thing about education only really came about to get women out of the house, and two, to get a literate and instruction following group of people to be ready to go to work, which meant the children now have to be educated to follow instructions at the factory. It's all just, I mean, there's the famous Rockefeller quote, right? I don't need a country of thinkers. I need a country of like instruction followers. I don't know what the real, like, it's on my website, but that's what he says. I don't need people to think. Right. I need people to just shut up and obey and do.
Follow orders, right?
And Rockefeller is the biggest donor in US history to education, at the beginning of education, right? So people really shouldn't kid themselves that this system that we have in place was designed for the benefit of children, that it was about, that any kind of child experts or psychology experts looked at children and thought, oh, what do we need for them to grow the best for them? It was never about that, right? I'm not accusing the current people in education of doing the same, but what we have to understand is the system has been passed down, and now we're making the best out of a bad system.
Right.
Because the teachers today, schools today are actually trying to, like, I meet so many education professionals now. Yeah. And when you talk to them one-on-one, they're very aligned with how I feel and how I think, that we have to focus on the child, that we have to prepare them for the AI future, that they have to, that rather than, the cookie cutter thing, that we have to mold them to be the best of themselves. But they're using a system that goes against that.
Yeah.
So they're trying to use that to achieve more modern thinking. And you really can't.
Yeah.
So, so we have to always look back at, as you said, indigenous cultures, not just in Sri Lanka, but all over the world, where it was, as you said, a village raises a child. How did that happen? Children followed their parents throughout the day. They learned. Play was learning. If you look at the entire animal kingdom, all animal play is actually them learning. You watch lion cubs play. What are they doing? They're practicing parts of hunting. They're practicing, how to lay low in the grass. There's the famous scene from Lion King where the father's teaching him how to lay low on the grass, right? Yeah. That's what play is. Play is not this time-wasting, nonsense thing. It has always been how all animals, including humans, we learn. And then we got rid of it, and then, the rest is history.
Yeah.
I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's the quote from Rockefeller, and he funded everything in American education. So, scary.
That is. So, just going into something that piqued my interest. Yeah, he's good. AI is a topic we're discussing in all industries at this time. In filmmaking, I'm not afraid of it. We actually use it to help us with our workflow, and we're embracing it to a certain extent. What are your thoughts on AI, and how are kids being introduced to this entering into our lives at this time?
I think I don't think most people are really aware of, one, how quickly things have already changed, and how much quicker that this is an exponential curve, and it's about to get crazy. And because we lived, none of our grandparents were alive during the last big revolution.
Right.
So I don't think we are really aware of how these, because we just spoke about the Industrial Revolution. So people during that time, just in a very short period of maybe one or maximum two lifetimes, they went from agricultural, rural living to urban, industrialized, machined living. And we're kind of going through the same thing, but because we don't have grandparents or great-grandparents who lived through that, and we don't have that very kind of tangible experience that we can pull from, we are walking into this as if it's never happened before. And huge upheaval is about to come, and it's not that it's not documented, it's not that it's hard to find. There's a real inertia for people, and that's fine. I mean, I guess that's also to be expected.
Yeah.
But where I get really freaked out is when we talk about children and education. Because I see parents, they spend a lot of money. Education takes over their lives because, parents are like waking up at 4:00 in the morning, and, like the whole life is around educating your child.
Right.
And even though they're doing it wrong, doesn't mean that they have wrong intent, or that, they are doing the best that they can. But when you're doing it, but you're doing it in such a backward way, in a way that will not in any way bring results to that child, then what are we doing? And I think already today, the gap between vacancies that are available global and the qualified people available for those jobs, I think is 65%, which is huge.
That's a huge gap.
That's a huge gap, right? And that's today, when we're not that far into the AI journey, when our education gap isn't quite so big.
Right.
That's today's graduates, right? Adults who are today. So if we're not addressing that with our 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds now, what are we going to look at both individually for a family? Like, how are your kids going to find jobs if you're not aware enough to make future-based decisions, which most parents aren't. And number two, as a country, as a global economy, what on earth are we walking to? Because we are so-called educating our kids in very backward ways, which means they will not be available or ready to fulfill the needs of the world as we go into this future.
Yeah.
One of my favorite and most scary statistics is, beyond 2030, we only know of 14% of the jobs available. What that means is if there's 100% of jobs available beyond 2030, we can only identify 14%,
right?
Which leaves 86% in the dark. So that's the global majority of 86%, right? So what is it that these schools with their O-levels and A-levels and this very traditional pathway studying subjects, what are you hoping to achieve with that? You can't. And the United Nations mandated for stopping subject-based education in 2019.
Interesting. I had no idea.
5 years ago. So 5 years ago, there's a United Nations report that very clearly says students have to move from subject-based education to multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, skill-based education. And it also lists out quite a lot of the skills that they should be focused on. I mean, this report is literally the foundation of my school. So it's exactly what we're doing. But it's terrifying that this is 5 years ago and parents aren't aware of it. Teachers and schools, I can't really blame because they're already in the system.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to change it.
Yeah.
But
I can understand that perspective because I'm a fan of raw milk. And I went up to a dairy farmer and I said, and he's got this fantastic operation in Wisconsin. And I said, what do you think about raw milk? He was like, oh, it's misinformation. You should never drink it. It's terrible for you. Because he runs this operation that literally milks cows and then it goes through like the whole system, right? I was like, what did you drink when you were younger? He was this 80-year-old man. I was like, raw milk. And I was like, I was never sick. And I was just like, I'm looking at his operation. I'm looking at him. I was like, yeah, it's because they're so in it that it's very hard for them to pull out and take a look at what they've invested into.
You can't blame them for it. Yeah.
So that came to mind. So is your hope with this this approach with your school, do you hope that this can be picked up where eventually, and do you have hope that maybe the Sri Lankan government would actually look at this as the modern school, the modern way of teaching at some point? Or do you think this is something that would not take off in a certain area?
My mind doesn't work like that. I was a government civil servant for 8 years of my life back home. I worked in, I call it Whitehall, but for everybody else it's Big Ben, right? But not that anyone actually works in Big Ben. It's a clock tower, but anyway, I don't see how. If that happens, great. But for me, it's about doing what we can. Yeah. Because every time we look at national solutions, because nationally is what? We have 8 billion people on the planet growing every day. When we start to look for whole solutions for everyone, it's bound to leave people behind. It's bound not to fit. Right? We're human. We're very diverse. And that's our beauty. So for me, my vision entirely rests on what can I do. And once I'm slightly separated from the school, what can the school do? Yeah. And sure, if that ends up one day being that, this model gets taken up, great, we'll play our part. But the vision should always be, what can I do? And what can we do as a team? And that's it. Because I think then beyond that, it starts to get really, you just end up in too much turmoil in your head about, will it happen? Will it not happen? If it happened, how would it happen? And then, a lot of people, there's mistrust with government and everything. So how will it get corrupted then? Will the message still be I don't want to get into. I'm all about reserving that energy and making sure we do what we can.
Fair enough. I feel like that's a fair way of looking at it.
Can I just add, like, even through the Aragalaya, there was a lot of focus on what can the government do. Let's change the government. Let's do this with the government. And I'm like, no, just change us. And the minute we change, it's a ripple effect, right? If I live according to certain principles, or if I live clean and I do good and you do, and then everybody else does, and then all the problems actually fix. But if we try to like uproot it from the top, then it causes a lot of other problems as well. So for me, it's always about coming back to what can I do today.
Self-audit, right?
100%.
Nice. Looking at your lifestyle as a person, as an individual, you have a beautiful family that you share with us on Instagram. You guys do a lot of, I would say it's very different with, like you said, like taking a trip to nowhere, I guess. And you're leaving a voter base on Instagram to tell you how to get to your location, or you don't even know what your destination is. So you've got 3 kids and your husband, and you guys choose that, okay, today on this particular day, we're going to travel. What stemmed behind that idea of doing that? Was that mainly for your kids to kind of like get their brains excited?
I'm a person that I don't have a travel bug. Very different from my generation. I really could not care less if I never got on another plane. I just just the thought of boarding a plane just makes me feel so tired. Just the amount of suitcases and packing and panic. Do I have my passport? Do I not have my passport? Like, all of that. But I am somebody who desperately needs adventure to just live. But for me, adventure is just like I could come out of this studio today and just walk down a road I've never walked down, which, by the way, in Colombo, you can do a lot because there's a lot of roads we've never walked down. And just like looking at like every house, and then a lot of the time the doors are open, and then it's like a little picture, and then like my photography brain really kicks in, and then you might, I'm not saying I have, but you might end up eating a few too many vades like while you're walking. But basically there's a lot of adventure to be had in the tiny, not in the big, right? And so this is something that's really important to me, and one of the ways I wanted to introduce that to my kids was to go on like a completely random, unplanned, we are not in control trip. And so 2 years ago, so what we do is it's our Boxing Day trip. So every year on December 26th, we take our backpacks and we go to Colombo bus stand. And at the moment, only 4 of us can speak. My 5th one is still, my 3rd child is still only under 2. So the people who can speak, they'll identify a bus that generally we like to come up with names which we've maybe never heard before. It sounds fun to say or whatever, right? And then we put those 4 into a poll on Instagram stories or Facebook stories. And then we just get people to vote. We go for breakfast. 45 minutes later, we check the vote and we get on the bus that's won. And then we generally spend about 5 days where we keep putting our next destination up for vote. So we are never in charge. And then when it gets to the afternoon, me and my husband get on our phones and we start looking for accommodation. But we have a thing where the budget is set to normally around 6,000 for all of us for the night, because it then takes out all the hotels that we normally would have booked. To again really like we've ended up in some crazy place, some amazing places.
Give me one example of like a place that you wouldn't have expected it to be for 6,000 rupees.
From the last trip, Puttalam Rest House for sure. Really nice. I mean, I guess people can go and complain, but the magic is where you find it. And if you're going place looking for this and that, then you might be disappointed. But to us, it was one of the most perfect places we'd stayed. So Puttalam Rest House. There is a cabana artist. There's an artist who owns like a cabana hotel just this way of Vaunia. It's about 10 kilometers back south from Vaunia. He's dug like a lake by himself. With an island, like a small lake, but with an island in it, and he's put a couple of cabanas. And never thought. That's cool. Never could have booked it, never would have found it. And he's an artist, and all his like sculptures and paintings are there. Really interesting.
Nice.
It was actually really pretty amazing to stay there. But yeah, you find like amazing, even 2 years ago, I think Pasikuda, there was another really nice place we found. But you can only do it when you remove all the things that you think you know.
Yeah.
And then, the magic happens.
Yeah. You're breaking patterns, which is really good.
Yeah.
I noticed that you're barefoot in the studio. Is that a thing? Is that something that you actually like? I know people that feel more connected and feel great when they actually take off their shoes and they connect to the earth. And I tend to do that sometimes. Actually, I haven't done it since I came back to Sri Lanka, but I should. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, is that a actual thing that you do, or you just don't care about shoes?
I love my shoes. My sparkly high heels are very much a source. I mean, my first job when I was 16, I worked in a shoe shop.
Cool.
And I think my entire salary at that point just went to buying shoes from the same shop. So it was kind of a weird, vicious cycle. No, I love my shoes. But like closed shoes with socks, it was born out of a need to keep the cold out of your feet. So why you would put that in a tropical country, it really baffles me. And it is a very colonized way of thinking.
Yes.
Because like white people came and told our, particularly men, long hair is savage, uneducated, unattractive, it's feminine. And you can't be barefoot, you can't be this, you can't have your body showing, it's disgusting. We had a lot of these Victorian Puritan ideals put on us, and to this day we put our 5-year-old boys have their hair cut. My son has long hair, and it's become a huge problem for social media.
Really? Like what? Like people are saying like cut your son's hair? They're telling you to do that?
Oh, just on the street, I'm being told, go cut your son's hair. Like,
wow.
And he's not 2 yet. So I'm waiting to see what happens when he's 10.
Yeah.
Or hitting puberty or something, I had one person on social media message me and accuse me of having a trans agenda because my son has long hair and was wearing a purple colored hair bubble. And apparently that was me having a trans agenda. I was like, because he questioned me. He said, why is your son's hair bubble purple? It can only be black or blue.
Wow.
And I said, because I'm a busy mom of 3 and this was the first bubble I could find. And I have like so much work to do that, I just grabbed it and put it in his hair. I didn't think about the color of it. You're the weirdo that's literally screenshotting other people's stories and getting upset.
Yeah.
But no, there's a very colonial agenda when it comes to, I find it funny being in education again, like in Sri Lanka, female teachers are by law required to wear sari.
Oh, I didn't know
They
that.
can't wear anything else.
Oh.
Government schools.
Right.
But for men, so if a woman has to wear a sari, surely then a man has to wear like a shirt and sarong, right?
Yeah.
By the same logic. But no, men are allowed to wear like shirts and trousers and shoes, because so there is a real like thing from colonialism where to be professional, a man had to look more white, and shoes came with that. And we're putting our kids into that. And there's so much research out there about how the closed shoes deform, particularly children's posture development.
Okay.
So spine, it impacts spine, knees, hips, everything. Why we doing that to our kids? So at my school, actually, we don't encourage kids to wear shoes. We prefer kids to come in their flip-flops, the rubber slippers. And that also, they come to school and they take even the flip-flops, they take it off and put it in the shoe rack.
Nice.
Because our school space is barefoot, and then most of the time they go to play and they're barefoot. If it's too hot, then they'll take the rubber slippers and go play.
Yeah.
But it's really important for children, forget the whole colonialism thing and all of that, just for their pure health, for their bone development, that they're not stuck in socks and shoes. You can make a fashion choice, and I wear socks and shoes sometimes for a fashion choice. But making it part of your everyday it's unhealthy, it's colonized, it's a whole bunch of things. And it's expensive. Why would you do it?
That's a really good point, actually. My dad used to say, when we were in Colombo, he would say, you can't go out, not wearing shoes. You have to dress nicely, because you have to you have to look a certain way.
Yeah.
If not, people will associate you being poor.
Yeah.
Or you're not doing well in life
Yeah.
if you're not wearing your socks and
Yeah.
shoes.
So to this day,
Yeah.
you can't walk as a man.
Hmm.
You can't walk into any of the top bars and restaurants in Colombo if you're not wearing covered shoes
Oh, okay.
or
Interesting.
shorts. Actually, shorts. So
Shorts.
so
yes.
I can wear the shortest shorts
Yeah.
and wear sandals, and they'll roll on the floor and be like, "Oh, good evening, madam." And my husband can't wear knee-length shorts and a pair of flip-flops or even like leather sandals. I'm not, nice smart sandals.
Yeah.
Because it's not dress code.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy, like diving into this colonialized mindset, or colonized mindset, has really like made me question a lot of choices in our own lives as to, why do I think like that?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And I think you're doing some fantastic, amazing work that
Thank you.
has piqued a lot of people's interest here, not just in Sri Lanka, but around the world as well. What you're doing is fantastic work. And I hope to have you on the podcast again.
Thank you.
For us to dive in deeper and see how things have progressed.
You have some really interesting perspectives, so I look forward to that a lot.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you, Yasodhara.
Thank you.
Yasodhara. For being here. And make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube, and you can check out the full episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. So thank you again, and we'll see you guys on the next one.